Hello there. Today we are going to be speaking about Aries Ascendants. So before we get into it, a bit of an introduction by saying that this is an assessment utilizing Vedic astrology. So that means that people who are Aries Ascendants using the tropical Western zodiac system are likely not going to be Aries Ascendants also in Vedic astrology. There's a difference in calculation of about 24 degrees. So a lot of people who are Aries Ascendants in tropical astrology will actually be Pisces ascendants in Vedic astrology, and a lot of people who are Taurus ascendants in tropical astrology can often end up being Aries ascendants in Vedic astrology. With that said, there's about a 6 to 7 degree overlap period, so it is possible to be Aries ascendant in both. But this is specifically an assessment for those individuals who have Aries ascendant in utilizing the Vedic system. So also another point to be aware of is that this is a foundational reading. So depending on the planetary placements, like where the house lords are, aspects, various other things, like certain energies about this can be heightened or mitigated to some extent. But this is kind of a foundational reading for all Aries ascendants. So with that said, let's go ahead and get into our assessment. Aries ascendants are the achievers. They are the driven individuals. They're youthful, excitable, dynamic, independent, driven, usually quite charismatic, and they have a lot of energy which they're able to bring to the fore when it comes to accomplishing their goals or doing whatever it is that they want to do. There's a real aura and energy of selfhood around them where they really just feel like they kind of show up to everything that they do. They have a sort of natural intrinsic knowing of who they are as a person. So they kind of come into it, and they're one of those people that when they're born they kind of hit the ground running. There's just their wheels are already going. They're like zoom, and they can just take off and do things. Aries ascendants have the wonderful gift of being able to self-initiate their actions. So when it comes to something they want to do, whether it's a task, a goal that they have, they have an intrinsic feeling that, they're capable of achieving that. They'll be, I know myself, I am able to go and accomplish that thing. And they'll go out and do it. They're not someone who really has to spin their wheels a lot in order to get going, or that they need other people's help in order to initiate. They really have that ability to be forthright, to just, decide for themselves, I'm going to do something, you know what? And they'll just get up and go do it right then and there. So it's a very, very powerful blessing and gift that Aries ascendants have. Since their first house ruler is Mars, these individuals generally are, they have a lot of physical energy. So they can be very athletic. They can be kind of indomitable. So if somebody's trying to push them around, they can be like, nah, you know what I mean? Like they can actually assert themselves. But generally speaking, I think when it comes to Aries ascendants, people kind of know that they're kind of not to be messed with to some extent. They have some of that Martian warrior energy, which makes itself apparent. But at the same time, these individuals can actually be quite kind and quite giving. Right across from them in their seventh house is Libra. So, when it comes to how they like to interact with people, they actually like to be very giving. They like to form relationships in a very diplomatic manner. They like to be liked, despite the fact that Mars is their chart ruler. And when it comes to finding romantic partners, which is their seventh house, they like to pair themselves with individuals who are balanced, with individuals who need their ability, or need the Aries ascendant's ability to initiate. So they'll like to find partners that are a little bit needy, maybe a little bit someone who kind of needs to be in a relationship. Right? And then that allows the Aries ascendant to play this role of, haha, now I'm here. You know, like I am here now. You're safe. You know, I'm able to go and accomplish all these things. Look at what I've done for you. You know, and so like the partners of the Aries ascendants, in some sense, like allows them to be their fullest self. I mean, that's kind of what all partnerships really kind of destined to do is to help us to feel complete, right? And so the Aries ascendant, in order to be dynamic and appear like they're able to accomplish things and to make that valuable to other people, they need a partner who needs those things. So another thing is that Aries ascendants can be quite impulsive. They can make decisions very quickly, and then they can just be like, I'm just gonna go do that thing, even if there's like maybe collateral damage or consequences to it. They're just like they don't want to wait. They like to be moving and keep moving. They would rather take on a new task and do something rather than wait patiently and see how things play out. So their Libra ascendant or their Libra partners provide a sort of diplomatic point of view. They're like, hey, did you know that if you choose to do this thing and this thing and this thing might happen. It might be better if we are patient and we do this thing instead. The Aries ascendant is like, oh, okay, that's a good idea. So the Libra ascendant partner kind of tempers the impulsivity of the Aries ascendant native. That's a very, very important role that they play. They also kind of soothe the intensity and aggression that can come with having an Aries ascendant. It's very similar with Scorpio ascendants because Mars and Venus are always on like opposite, on like the same axis, right? So Taurus is always going to have Scorpio on the other side of it, Venus and Mars. Aries is always going to have Libra on the other side of it, Mars and Aries, or Mars and Venus. So the Mars and Venus connection is always there on the same axis. So in the same way that like the intensity of a Scorpio, or in a similar way that the intensity of a Scorpio ascendant is kind of soothed and nourished and balmed by their Taurus ascendant partners who are very fertile, you know, uh, pleasurable, stable individuals, you have this kind of emotional, social, soothing. That's like a cool breeze that comes into a hot engine room, and really helps to balance things out. So that really works in the favor of an Aries ascendant. Now, one of the interesting things about this placement is that, because the seventh house is still that native seventh house, right? So Aries ascendants actually want to be diplomatic and kind and well liked and perceived like they're very giving people. Um, and so there's a little bit of a waffle that can sometimes happen to where they're like Aries ascendants are like fine on their own, and they can kind of like get into a partnership, and they can sometimes like not understand proper give and take in partnerships. They might take too much from the partner. They might, be too selfish or too demanding, or they may give too much in their partnerships and then have to kind of like double back on their own independent nature afterwards. So they might like get into a relationship and they're just like super loving and agreeable, like, oh wow, this is so great, I get to be with this person. They'll kind of put a lot of focus and attention and energy on their partner, and then if that relationship doesn't work out, they're like, oh, you know what, like, okay, wow, that hurt a lot, let me kind of come back into my independent energy. Maybe I don't need that kind of thing or a relationship. Let me just boom, go forward independently. So finding a balance in relationships is important for Aries ascendants, because Libra energy isn't necessarily inherently a place where we automatically have balance. It's a place where we have to actively maintain balance. So actively maintaining balance in relationships can be a bit of a challenge for an Aries ascendant. It's something you have to be very conscious of, because they may, like I said, seesaw between being too selfish or being too giving, um, and learning how to actually uh, be patient and be intelligent and balance those things consciously is important. So Aries ascendants have Taurus in their second house. So they can sometimes be born into wealthy families. They can be born into families that prioritize wealth. Even when they get into relationships, because Venus rules both their second and seventh houses, they can be dating or marrying partners who value wealth and money. So like they may see the Aries person, the partner of the Aries ascendant person, may see the Aries ascendant person as someone who is capable, dynamic, driven, motivated, independent, and can therefore pursue goals to achieve wealth and status, right? So that's something that they can be drawn towards, is like actually Aries Ascendant natives are often perceived as quite competent. And so sometimes they can kind of attract partners who are a little bit like um, too dependent, right? Now, dependency can be a very, very beautiful thing. So it's a matter of like, how balanced out that is, like whether the Aries person really wants a dependent partner, because it can be, a desirable thing, or if an Aries partner isn't expecting that and wants a partner who's behaving a little differently, especially like in the case of an Aries ascendant woman, for example. It's very, very important to be conscious that the partners that an Aries ascendant can often attract will often want resources, want support, want to lean on and rely on that Aries ascendant person's independent, driven, successful nature. Um, so also like the Aries ascendant person themselves, they really value wealth and prosperity in general, right? Because the second house has to do with what we value. So they're going to value pleasure. They're going to value the fine things in life. They're going to value family. Taurus has to do with family as well, Tauresian energy, as well as the second house energy. So with that said, the pathway to accumulating that wealth is usually one that has to be done in a very steady, um, consistent way, because Taurus is a fixed sign. It's a fixed earth sign. So it's very, very fixed, which means that, they're not necessarily the type of ascendant that'll just spontaneously super quickly come into money, get rich quick schemes, that kind of thing. Unless something like Rahu's in their 11th house, then maybe a little bit they'll be able to have those abilities. Certain placements can modify that a little bit. But generally speaking, they will need to really put in effort and just kind of like consistently put money in a savings account, kind of cultivate wealth like you would cultivate a garden. Like you don't throw seeds in the ground in the garden and expect it just to pop up without any work. You got to till, you got to get the soil right. You got to make sure the nutrients are in the soil correctly. You've got to plant the seeds at, the right spaces from each other. There's a lot of things that go into. You got to water them frequently. You got to make sure they have the nourishment. There's all these things that have to go into cultivating a garden. Usually takes a type of tending to consistently over an extended period of time, and that's how they have to treat their wealth. They have to treat it like I'm cultivating and nurturing this garden consistently, and you can see that they can eventually become quite wealthy, so long as they don't do anything kind of impulsive or reckless in the meantime. So their third house is Gemini, and this makes them very gregarious, generally speaking. Like we talked about how Aries ascendants are generally well liked, especially in the beginning. They make great first impressions. They kind of have a magnetism about them that's kind of speaks for itself. But long term in relationships, they can struggle a little bit more. Like they can easily form connections quickly. They can easily be well liked right off the bat. But then the everyday humdrum of things, like kind of just, knowing someone over a long period of time, living with somebody, having a friend who you're hanging out with every day, that part can get a bit challenging because they can kind of thrive in sort of like hopping from one experience to the next experience very quickly, very rapidly. Um, but when it comes to, their acquaintances, their younger siblings, their neighbors, their friends, when they're just hanging out with friends, they can just talk, they can just hang out, they can talk about almost anything. They can small talk, they can really just make people feel good and feel like they're energizing people just by being around. So they're very easy to kind of just walk up into a group of people and be like, hey, what's up, how you been, boom 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 boom, and just make a really good impression of themselves. um, when it comes to their skills, Aries ascendants have an interest in a wide variety of skills. So like when it comes to actually like, learning different things, they're like, oh, I want to learn this. Oh, I'm interested in this. Oh, I'm interested in this. This is great. They'll usually have a knack for picking up a new skill. So they kind of have a multifaceted, maybe a little bit of a jack of all trades kind of energy, where they're just like, I can pick up this thing and be good at it sort of immediately. They can like be skateboarding. They can then try writing. They can then try this thing, then this thing, then this thing. And they're like kind of good at everything. But when it comes to kind of like dedicating themselves to really cultivating a single skill or a group of skills over a long period of time, they can get bored pretty easily. They're just like, man, I just really want to go and do something else. So you can find that they have a lot of just started skills that they haven't really finished developing, or like just a lot of efforts that they started to put into something. And then they're just like, I'm bored. It's more exciting to go perform this new thing. And they'll think that, you know, that thing that they're putting effort into in the beginning is going to take them far. They might think of themselves in their mind like they're going to go far with this thing. It might make them money. It's going to, do all this cool stuff. And then they'll do it for a few weeks, maybe a month or two, and then they'll get bored and then go do something else. So it's very, very important that they learn how to um, recognize this characteristic within themselves. And maybe if they can kind of balance that multiplicity kind of Gemini energy by practicing and studying multiple skills, developing multiple skills at the same time, but developing those multiple skills consistently. So like can be a little way to kind of work with the Gemini energy to still develop skills um, in a thorough manner. So whereas like, okay, if you get bored, like you're hopping between like, a few different skills. So like say, it's like, um, it's like skateboarding. It's uh, another type of sport. It's writing and, journalism or something, whatever it is. Like as soon as they're bored with journalism, they're on to writing their books. As soon as they're bored with writing the books, they just run outside and start skateboarding. And they cycle between their skills very, very rapidly. And that will allow you to still develop those skills because you're putting time into the skills consistently. It's like, okay, every week you keep running outside and skateboarding, but you're still able to move around and experience the novelty. So Cancer is in their fourth house, and this really is very simple and straightforward. Like Aries ascendants can feel very comfortable at home. For Aries ascendants, it's pretty cool because they have every sign in its natural house. Like Aries naturally belongs in the first house. Taurus is naturally the second zodiac sign, belongs in the second house. Gemini in the third, etc., etc. So, for them, the home space is a place that feels comfortable for them. Now, obviously, there are people that like to go around and do a lot of stuff. So it's not to say they're always hermited in their home or anything like that. They're definitely not. But, I mean, unless a lot of other placements, like Moon in the fourth or some other things really support it. But, Sun in the fourth. But, they really feel comfortable in that space. It's a place that brings them comfort. They'll like to have that balanced, and it's something that their partner can do to help them a lot, is to like make their home feel homey, make it feel like a home. It can really kind of bring a lot of comfort and stability to an Aries ascendant when they do that. So I think particularly in the case of the male Aries ascendants, this kind of leads them to have very feminine wives because of the Libra in the seventh and because of the Cancer in the fourth. Like they'll kind of want their wife to be, a very charming, very, uh, diplomatic, agreeable, balanced person. And then also kind of being able to provide that home space that when they come home from doing all this stuff, because they do a lot. Like they also have Capricorn in their 10th, they're in Aries Ascendant, they're going to be doing a lot of things. So when they come home, they really want to be able to feel relaxed. They want to be able to feel comforted. They want to be able to feel like everything is just this wonderful nest that feels good. So then Leo is in their fifth house. And this really is quite interesting. Like the more they educate themselves, like in their early education, their creativity is really going to come out. Like they might be sitting in class and just be having explosions of creative ideas. Maybe they're not focusing so much on learning the math because again, they have that Gemini in the third house. So they're like kind of got a little ADD when it comes to bouncing between different tasks and things, learning different skills, but they're going to be bursting forth with creative ideas all the time. And they're going to feel like through my creativity, I can really shine and achieve success and achieve this kind of royal status, the really height of my own personal development. They're going to be able to take a lot of pride in their kids and their children. When Aries ascendants have children, they're like, these are my children. Look at how awesome my children are. These are like the best children, and they'll really want these children to be brought up in a kind of royal manner to really fulfill their potential. They'll really see the brightness in their own children and try to bring that out of them. So the children are really, I think, going to get a lot of benefit from that energy. Another thing is that the art and the creative expression of Aries ascendants brings them a tremendous amount of success and recognition, sometimes fame. So when they do kind of like actually succeed in expressing themselves and creating art, they can get a lot of success through that. Like Sun and Mars are very, very good friends. Sun loves to be in the fifth house here with that Leo in the fifth house, because it's the house that it belongs in. So it's a very strong position to have Leo in the fifth house here. And when they're dating, they feel like top of the world. Like whenever they're dating somebody, they feel like they have just come upon the jackpot of all jackpots. They feel just like, I'm finally able to be myself. I'm able to shine. They're so generous and benevolent towards the people that they're dating. A lot of times it feels like they're showering their romantic partner in the same way that someone would like be a king or a queen and shower a romantic interest. It's very beautiful and romantic and dynamic, and it makes a person feel really special and doted on and adored. So Virgo in the sixth house is an interesting placement. It's kind of challenging to some extent, even though Mercury is exalted in its own sign of Virgo. So you think this would be super awesome, but the sixth house is the house of challenges and enemies and work and 9 to 5s and things like that. A lot of difficult things go on there. So you generally want a sign that's able to bear difficulty and push through and accomplish something, right? It's able to stand up to difficulties, stand up to disputes and conflicts. But here you have Virgo energy, which is great for a lot of things like herbalism and logic and finances and rationality and calculative, nature and things like that. It's very, very good for a lot of things. But something that it doesn't do very well is stand up to hardship, right? So Virgo is actually a very, very anxious, kind of fragile energy. It's a little bit like building something with sticks, It's like, it's super precise, but if you put some stress on that, it's going to like fall apart. And so Virgo energy can make, a person just, when you put weight on it, it just feels like burdensome. It's just like, man, I really don't want to feel stress here, I want things to just work out well in that area. So despite having this kind of warrior, aggressive, driven energy as an Aries ascendant, when it comes to their obstacles, they can sometimes be hesitant. They can sometimes be confused. They can sometimes be stressed out or anxious that there are obstacles to their desires. So instead of like a Scorpio ascendant, they have Aries in the sixth house. So they're like warriors, and will just plow. Like an obstacle showed up, they'll get more motivated that an obstacle or a challenge has shown up. They're like, oh, I'm just going to eat that obstacle and just, surmount it, right? And they almost get more excited that there's a challenge. An Aries ascendant will get more disappointed or more anxious or more frustrated if there's an obstacle. It's like, I want to go. Why are you in my way? Oh my gosh, this is in my way. Now I have to sit here and do all this tedious stuff when really all I want to do is flow freely. So I think this is an area of an Aries ascendant's life where it can be quite challenging. I think that just the bottom line for their energy is that they want things to go their way, right? They want to be nice and they do want to be diplomatic with their partners and to make them feel good and things like that. But they also want things to go their way. And so, you can really see a lot more about that by looking at where Mars is positioned, exactly like, what area they're a bit more uncompromising with. But, they don't do well when obstacles, like, you can really stress them out, even affect their health physically, if too many obstacles are presenting themselves to what they feel like they're doing and what their goals are and the way that they're driving themselves. So when it comes to like their health, it's important for them to be pretty meticulous with it. So due to this fact, so if they are going through, something that is an obstacle and they start to feel stressed out, they've really got to start to be rational and think that through. Like, okay, this isn't only a temporary obstacle. We got to be a little more rational with it. I'm going to do this thing, and this thing calculatively to get out of this situation and this obstacle, and then I'm going to be able to go freely again and just be able to drive in the direction that I want. But they've kind of got to slow down and deal with the tedium of the humdrum of everyday life when those sixth house energies start to activate. So it's very important, I think, that they are, when it comes to their diet, when it comes to their, supplements and things of that nature, that they are very calculative and very meticulous. And I think that will support their overall health and not allow them to get too stressed out. It's really, really beneficial. So we talked about the seventh house already. We'll go ahead and move on to the eighth house. which is where they have Scorpio, right? So Mars is ruling both their first house in Aries and their eighth house. So there's a first eighth house connection here going on, which means that they have an interest in occultism, in really deep, passionate experiences, in joint assets. They kind of will like us to some degree, like a bit of a, like they like power, right, to some extent. Um, and some of the things that really helps to nourish their marriages and their relationships are like the deep, passionate, intense things which underlie that, right? So, Aries ascendants can actually bond with somebody because the eighth house waters the seventh house. So whatever, like the eighth house, is like the intimate experiences which help to nourish the relationship, which is the seventh house. So they need scorpionic energy to fully nourish that seventh house energy. So even though they want a partner who is nice and diplomatic and agreeable and all these things, they also want a partner who they can be deep with, who they can like talk about their trauma and their challenges and their struggles and their ambitions with. They want like an intensity which underlies it, and then still having this like very pleasurable exterior around it. Um, so like a lot of their traumas and their difficulties, they'll keep hidden. The eighth house is the house of hidden things. Scorpio is a house of sign of traumas and of that kind of thing. So they actually will keep a lot of their things hidden. You might not know how much trauma an Aries ascendant has. It seems like they're indomitable and they've never been hurt by anything until they start to get into these very, very intimate spaces, and then it comes out with their intimate partner or something of that nature. They also may keep their interest in occultism somewhat secretive as well. Again, due to some of the other placements, like how deep they go with it, uh, is a matter of debate because they have that third house Gemini. But their ability to, in general, like kind of dive deep into occult topics is actually there because scorpionic energy is fixed water. So if they have an emotional connection to a certain type of occult practice, they can develop it to a very high level. They can also kind of just be born with a high level of occult power in some specific area. So it might be that, maybe they don't have like a wide, vast, full understanding of all the different types of occultism or the principles of the universe, but they might have one or two kind of affinities. And those are like powerful, deep affinities where they just like come in with it and they're just like, boom, I have this. And they've just been had it since they were born. So it's very, very powerful to have that in that position. So Sagittarius in the ninth house gives them also the ability to understand higher spiritual knowledge. So that's also a very, very good placement. They have the ability to understand the occult, like magic, deep, deep scorpionic things, and higher philosophical things. So that's a very powerful combination to have where you can get both magic and spirituality. A lot of other ascendants only kind of have one or the other, or they'll be better at one or the other. There's a good balance here in their spiritual affinity. So obviously you need to see the house lords to see, if they're leaning more towards their career in this lifetime, towards personal goals, towards spirituality, but they have that basic structure to be able to understand higher principles. With that said, Sagittarius is a fire sign, so they can still be hard to teach. So even though they can kind of grasp higher principles, there's a bit of an independence to some extent in the way that they'll do it. Of course, Jupiter is exalted or something like that. It'll make it easier. But, there's definitely a certain type of their own way that they'll go about learning certain things. There's a certain type of current they have to follow. They can't just sit down and be taught like in the type of formal setting. They're going to be like, yes, sir, and just obey everything. It's not exactly like that. It's more of their journey towards spirituality and the meaning of life is just that. Like it's a journey. It's a personal journey, like a pilgrimage that they go on in a certain sense. It's the journey of life itself. It's not something that's easily packaged and handed to them and they're just going to download that wisdom and be like, yes, I agree. I'm going to now change my life because you told me to. So that's something important to keep in mind. Now, with Capricorn in the 10th house, and also Saturn rules their 10th house and their 11th house. This is where it gets fairly challenging. Like we talked about the sixth house, that was fairly challenging. But also here, because Mars and Saturn, they tend to clash a lot. They have their struggles quite a bit. Like Saturn is debilitated in Aries. It's also weird that Mars is exalted in Capricorn. So it's just like on almost every combination, Mars and Saturn kind of like wreck each other, and then one of the combinations is just Mars is exalted. So there's something to be said about that. And there's like a video for another time talking about Mars and Capricorn and why that's exalted. But definitely in this case, you know, Aries ascendants can sometimes be frustrated with the delay when it comes to their career. Like Aries ascendants really feel like everything should just go the way they want it. Like when they start something, they feel like I have the energy, I have the drive, I have the. It should just happen. I should just be able to manifest that. Where are these weird obstructions coming from? Like why am I just not getting it? Because I'm putting in the effort. I'm putting in I have the drive. I'm actually doing it. Why am I not getting the results? And that's because Saturn is going to delay the progression of their career. You know what I mean? Capricorn here, it's going to eventually give them a strong career if they're pursuing that, assuming that Mars and Saturn are both well placed and all that stuff. But it's going to take some time. You might see that like mid to late 30s, 40s, where their career really starts to actually kind of take shape. It can be very difficult, and the frustration pertaining to the career can be high. It's kind of like sitting there and you're like flooring the gas in your vehicle, but it's in park. And so you're sitting there, the wheels are spinning and you're like, go, go, but the car is literally in park and you're just like, oh. So that can be like mitigating the frustration. I think for an Aries ascendant is really key, especially for your physical health. Like if you find yourself getting frustrated, like you really gotta find some way to soothe yourself, like really kind of calm down, do some meditation, make love, do something to eat a nice snack, do something to kind of relax yourself. Go to a spa, get a massage, because the stress buildup here can really kind of like leak over into other areas of life and cause problems. Like you'll notice that like if you let yourself get too stressed out, say your career isn't going as fast as you want it to go, it'll like that frustration will go into other areas of life and it'll start kind of detonating those areas of life, or like putting up obstacles where there weren't any in completely other areas of life because you're frustrated about one of these other things. So that's very, very important to understand. But with that said, as they mature, like I said, like kind of late 30s, 40s, and they do kind of, their Mars is matured and their Saturn is reaching maturity, and they're sort of coming out of their youthful hormones and stuff like that. They start to get more balanced. Then they can end up eventually having a very solid career. They can actually end up at a very high degree of respect, with a good like status and title in life. But it's definitely going to be later in life. Their reputation in society is a little serious. Like people will kind of encounter them as like an intense person, a little bit of a harsh person, right? So like their partner might encounter them as just this loving, you know, uh, especially in the dating phase, like very charming, very doting on, lavishly, romanticizing their partner, and then wanting their partner to feel good because of Libra being in the seventh house and things of that nature. But then when it comes to how they're perceived in society, they can be perceived as quite harsh. So like those first impressions of the Aries ascendant can be intense, and the general reputation can be pretty intense too. They can be pretty intimidating to, like, if somebody's like thinking about working with them, or they just hear about this person's reputation, they're like, dang, this person, this is gonna be harsh. Like this is a lot. That's something to be aware of as well. With Aquarius in the 11th house, again, when it comes to incoming gains, there's also still a delay. So you have fixed signs in all of the money houses. So it's like second house, eighth house, and 11th house, and also a fifth house of speculative gains, all fixed signs. All right. So the wealth accumulation, is really something that has to just be built steadily. There's really just no way around that. Whether it's making money, whether it's saving money, whether it's speculating on money, you've always got to take a very consistent, grounded approach to developing it. And so the finances can be a bit delayed, but something that can help to benefit and give you more finances is to network well. So like your social group, your network circle, like the more well connected you are in society, the more people you know, the more opportunities to make wealth will arise. All right, so that's something that's very beneficial to you. Now, obviously, certain placements can make this a little easier. Like I said, Rahu in the 11th can definitely do that. But just in general, this is definitely something like Jupiter or Venus in the second can make it easier to accumulate the assets and stuff. But this is definitely something to be mindful of. Another thing is that when it comes to fulfilling your hopes, dreams, and wishes, your network circle helps you to do that too. So really, the network circle is really essential to accomplishing a lot of things you want to accomplish. Right? These are Aries Ascendants are really not the type of people that are meant to be hermits, that are meant to be isolated from society. They really benefit by being well connected. They really benefit by going out and networking and meeting a lot of people, and they have the ability and the talent to do so. So then that brings us to Pisces being in the 12th house, another very strong position. Just like with Scorpio in the 8th and Sagittarius in the 9th, Pisces in the 12th gives them very powerful spiritual abilities and affinities. Like their dreams can be very clear. They can have astral experiences. They can receive downloads in their dreams. Now, sometimes their minds might be racing so much that they're kind of speeding over it, right? Again, being patient is something that they have to really put effort forth to cultivate. But their spiritual attunement naturally is very high. And I think also like this naturally makes them want to be very giving, charitable people. You know, they naturally want to connect with and care for people in a spiritual way. But also being in the 12th house indicates that it's something that this is a part of themselves where they might not be fully aware that this is the case. They may have a deep spiritual connection that's very strong and have a lot of spiritual abilities, but they may be hidden even from themselves because they're so busy. They're like zoom in here, zoom in there, and they're not being mindful and present enough with their own connection to become fully aware of that. So this is something that can really come out. Like if they take psychedelics or go into an altered state of consciousness or travel to foreign lands, all of a sudden their spiritual attunement will shine and bloom. They may start getting huge spiritual insights, tremendously potent downloads just from traveling to a foreign land or going into an altered state in a drum circle or trying psilocybin or ayahuasca. They like it's almost like a flood of information that had been accumulating within themselves comes to the fore, and they're just like, here is all this spiritual knowledge just ready for you already. So Aries Ascendants are very powerful. They're definitely quite balanced when it comes to all of their houses and signs. Like I said, there are a few challenges there, but for the most part, they get a lot of benefits and balance from having every sign in its proper house. So just maintaining like a few things to be mindful of when it comes to things to keep in alignment and to work on is obviously patience, not being too arrogant, not being too impulsive, learning how to be diplomatic when your own sort of desires and goals and things are sort of at play and in the forefront of your mind. Because sometimes when you have a drive or a goal or something that you're focused on, you may just kind of be just rolling over people without maybe even realizing it, or you might not care as much, or you might get into a state where you're just like, screw it, I'm just gonna plow through. So there can be kind of consequences of that sort of behavior. And Aries Ascendants, they do a little bit of an act first, think later kind of. They have that kind of behavior. So it's good to balance that to some extent, while at the same time balancing it without minimizing your own drive. And so one of the ways that you can do that, because one of the things you don't like is like you're starting to drive and you start going to like start to rear up, and then you've got to stop and calculate and be patient after you started going. That's very annoying to Aries Ascendant. It's very frustrating to have to stop mid-go. So what you do is kind of like when you're shooting an arrow, you aim first. So do the calculations before you start moving towards a goal, before you start driving yourself towards achieving something, before you start acting. Think out as much as you can more meticulously. Okay, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, this might happen. Calculate as best you can. Be super reasonable. If you can have help from another person, like a romantic partner with that Libra in the seventh, that'll help you generally stay sober minded. And then once you feel like you've really gotten the map laid out, you really gotten the track laid out, you're like, okay, I really have thought this through. I know what I'm doing. Now I'm going to go. Then you can go, right? And then you'll know, like, the course corrections are kind of already there woven into the map you made. You're like, oh, boom, I can do this. Boom, I can do this. You don't have to, like, think and calculate it or slow down in the moment now because you already thought through all those things. That will help you a lot, all right? So before you start going and revving your engine and driving, plan and calculate to the extent that you're able to. Get a second opinion, get a third opinion, get a fourth opinion maybe, and then you're like, all right, now I'm going to zoom out and go. All right? So I hope you like this. I hope this was helpful to you. I'd love to hear more about your comments of being an Aries Ascendant or knowing an Aries Ascendant and just various things about them posted in the comments below. And if you have any questions, I'll do my best to answer them down there as well. And yeah, thanks for watching.